Welcome to Adobe Photoshop TV from the National Association of Photoshop Professionals. And here's your hosts, the Photoshop guys, Scott Kelby, Dave Cross, and Matt Klaskowski.
From the floor of Photoshop World, Photoshop TV is on the air.
To a live episode of Photoshop TV, brought to you by the National Association of Photoshop Professionals, the fine people who bring you Photoshop User Magazine.
This week's show is brought to you by a bunch of sponsors that you'll see on your screen right now.
Yes, these fine sponsors right here.
We're very happy that they're our sponsors.
They're all around us. Yeah, their booths are right here all around us. So, all right, well, my name is Scott Kelby, and joining me, as always, from the great country of Canada, our neighbors to the north, Mr. Dave Cross.
Hello, everybody.
And rocking the house key, it's Matt Klaskowski. Well, welcome everybody. For those of you at home, you haven't been here for the excruciating last half hour that we've had with technical problems that you have when you do live television. Because, as you know, the regular Photoshop TV is a tightly scripted, highly produced, slick program. And here today, it was not quite as slick as we normally would like to do. But that's not going to stop us from producing a show today that is absolutely excruciating. So, without further ado, before we get started, we are broadcasting live, of course, from Photoshop World here in Las Vegas, Nevada, in the fabulous Mandalay Bay Resort and Casino. There are about 3,000 plus Photoshop users from all around the world here, and we kicked off things with a keynote this morning, and we've had some classes this morning and this afternoon, and now we're on the expo floor. We're surrounded by vendors. From where I'm sitting, I can see Epson, Adobe, I see iStock Photos booth. Hey, they're one of our sponsors right there. iStock Photos over there. PHOTOSHOPTV, they're one of our sponsors. And also, I see a lot of soft boxes. There they are, the softbox guys over there. All right, and Expo Imaging. We love you guys. Expo Disc, I just bought one this week. The greatest thing in the world. Go buy Expo Discs. They're just amazing for white balancing. And I can see everybody sees Site Grinder over here. And we are in Microsoft's booth. They were nice enough to let us use their booth because they obviously have a huge budget and a big booth. So they were nice enough to let us. So thanks to Tim Gray and everybody at Microsoft for letting us hang out in their booth. All right, our first tutorial comes to us from our international friend, Mr. Dave Cross. Dave, what do you have for us today?
I have something, when you look at the photo that I'm showing you now, this is not a photo that I don't think you would generally be proud of saying, wow, I love this photo. This is just a great photo. But I took this for a very specific purpose. Now that I'm finished, if I can do a blatant plug for my recent book, Photoshop Finishing Touches, I did a whole series of border effects, and now when I'm looking around, taking other photos, I see things like this, and I think, you know what, that would make for a great border.
Yeah, I saw that. When I saw that, I said, man, that would make a great border.
That isn't a border photo ready to be taken.
Really, absolutely.
So we're going to turn this into a border, and here's how we're going to do it. I'm going to start off by making a selection, roughly of the size that I'm going to use as my border, and then I'm going to add a threshold adjustment layer. And of course, because I already have a selection, it's going to just do the threshold in that area. So to begin with, I'm just going to roughly decide that's kind of what I had in mind. So that ultimately is going to be my border, but I don't necessarily have to pick that specific area, because if I unlink the two, the adjustment layer and the layer mask, now I can take this and kind of move it around to see the different options that I'm going to get. When you see the final step, you'll kind of get the idea of what you're looking for here, because ultimately this border is going to be part of my layer mask. So I'm looking for different bits of black and white that will give me different effects. So once you've done this a couple times, you'll have an idea of what you're looking for. But I basically try and find a place that's an interesting combination of these different patterns, and I need to copy that. Well, of course, I have an adjustment layer, so here's how I do that. If I hold down the Command key on the Mac or Control for Windows and click on that layer mask, it loads it as a selection. Then I go under Edit. Instead of just using Copy, I choose Copy Merge because I want to copy that area of the photo with the threshold adjustment layer applied to it. So I'm going to copy that, and then we'll actually go to the photo we're going to use this effect on. So you'll see the effects of that in a moment. So I want to be able to create this border using this. So here's what we're going to do. I always like to start off by duplicating the background layer to give myself something to work on, and I want to ultimately see through this top layer. Now I learned the hard way, if you add a layer mask to a copy of your background layer, it looks like nothing's happening because of course you're seeing through to exactly the same image underneath. So instead I'm going to add a new layer below, which I'll fill with white. So then when I do the next steps, you'll be able to see what's happening. So actually I want to also add a little bit more canvas size. So we'll just add a little bit around the outside, like so. Just make sure that's filled with white again. Okay, so here we go. Now we want to start creating our little border effect. So I'm going to, once again, Command or Control click on this top layer to load as a selection, and then add a layer mask, which of course initially will have no effect because I've made a layer mask exactly the same size. Now, remember that thing I copy merged a couple of moments ago, I need to use that as a border, but here's the kind of trick to this. If I just tried to paste it, it would paste it as a new layer. I need to paste it on the layer mask. And the only way to do that is to view the layer mask. You do that by holding down Option or Alt and clicking on the layer mask. Now I'm actually seeing the mask. Now when I paste that copy merge thing, it puts this weird pattern on there, which I will free transform to make it a little smaller. Let's make this so it's actually pretty close to the size I want. And basically then it's just a matter of positioning it where you want. Now you have to kind of go back and forth here because when you look at it like that, it doesn't look like much. So you have to sort of go back to the layer, and there's the start of my little border effect. So basically all I need to do is continue that procedure of pasting on here. And of course, now I could do a couple of that. I'm just going to paste the same one, but I could go back and pick a different vertical area. Here I'm going to have to just zip it around here to make it the size. But of course, because we're in free transform, you don't have to be happy with it the size it is. You can squeeze it down. You can make it a smaller size, whatever you want. Again, we're just going to go with this version just because I have it here. But normally I would probably go back and forth a couple times and maybe even deliberately not make it perfectly horizontal and vertical, something like that. And then we end up with a little border effect, something like that. And because we've done it this way, it's of course very easy to change our mind. First of all, let's just add a drop shadow. Why? Because we can.
Because you can.
Yeah, it's just one of those things where if you can, why wouldn't you? So there's our nifty little border effect, but done in a way that, of course, this is still a layer mask. So if you want to take it a little step further, you want to experiment, and that's the whole idea of these different techniques. Look what happens. It looks pretty weird right now, but if I want to take it a whole different direction, I just do this. Add a bit of a blur, so you lose some of the detail, and this is again where I have to experiment. You just lost a little bit of detail, and now if I go back and do my threshold adjustment, it'll create a whole different effect. So, there's a lot less detail now, and then I get a border effect that looks like that. So many different possibilities, and what it means is when you're out doing a photo shoot and you're seeing all the interesting things you want to shoot, look for different textures. For example, here's another one. This is literally the parking lot. Actually, it won't look like this anymore because they're paving our lot this week, aren't they? But this is actually the parking lot right outside our building. I just thought, hey, there's some interesting shapes in there. So start looking for textures and just build up a library. Then you apply that threshold command, and you very easily have the ability to create border effects like that.
Dave, that is just all right, now, Mr. Kloskowski, on the flight out here to Las Vegas, tells me, hey man, I came up with something, a cool technique to show here, but he refused to show it to Dave or I, which means it's really, really good, or it stinks. So, let's see what you got, Mr. Kloskowski.
That's very important.
That's very
Do
important.
I have, I do. So.
Oh, I like this delayed reaction, but there it is.
So what I've always thought was cool, even though I use a PC, I always like that desktop pattern in the background of a Mac. I think it looks pretty cool. I've never seen a tutorial that really got it. I've seen some attempts at it, but I've never really seen anything that got it. So I sat on the plane on the way out here. And I came
4.5 hour flight.
on a 4.5 hour flight, and I came up with a tutorial on how to create that Mac background. So,
Sorry, Matt, if I could just interject, I wish I'd known you were going to say that, because I have a picture of Matt working on the plane. It looks kind of like this.
that was only the last half hour. All right, so we start off, we create a new image here. 800 by 600, I'll start off with that. It needs to be as large as whatever your desktop size is. So we get this black or blank white screen here. Very first thing you need to do is fill the background with a gradient. So select as your foreground color, you're going to take RGB 61, 93, and 171. That's your foreground color. Take your background color
Now,
here.
how'd you come up with that color? Just sample like an Apple desktop or something?
Yes.
Okay.
And then we're going to go RGB 62, and we're going to go 109, and 198. Now we take our gradient tool, use the linear gradient, and just drag from the top left all the way down to the select the foreground to background gradient, not the black and white one, and drag from top left to bottom right. So now you've got your background. Next thing that we'll do here is we're going to create some paths. So I'm going to select my path tool here, or my pen tool, get my foreground color to white, and you're going to create just some random shapes here. So I've got a couple. What's easiest to do is you're going to want to draw outside of that canvas area. So I always start outside here. Just create a rounded shape. And it doesn't matter what you're doing out here, because the only thing that you're going to see is over the canvas. And close the object. Now we want to change the layer a little bit. So I want to add a layer style, and I want to change the fill opacity. So let's go to our little F icon down there and choose blending options. And the first thing I'll do is I'll drop the fill opacity down. Take it down to 30%. And then we're going to add an inner glow layer style. And I'll put a little trick here. I'm going to press Control H, Command H on the Mac. You see, it hides that little out. I'm pointing on my screen like you can see. It hides out a little outline on the background there. And then we're going to use this inner glow layer style. I'm going to leave the color the same, but change the opacity to 40%. All right? And then just click on OK. Next thing we do now is we're just going to keep drawing a few more of these shapes here. So here's where you can get as creative as you want, or you can try to look at the Mac desktop and repeat exactly what they did. But I'm going to draw a shape up here. Like so. And notice what happened? It automatically remembered that layer style that I just used. So that's why I applied it to that layer first, because now I don't have to keep reapplying it to every layer afterwards. Now we'll do another little start down here, and I will draw that across. There we go. And we'll do another shape over here. And again, remember, it doesn't matter what's outside the canvas. And then finally, just about like that. So you always want to close those shapes. So now we've got our shapes. The first thing I do here is I click on the top one and I shift click on the bottom one. And see it selects all those layers, and then just press Control G, Command G on the Mac to group them together. And now I'm going to duplicate this group. And then just hide one, because it kind of keeps my shapes on their own layer, so now I don't have to worry about if I mess up later. All right, a couple more things that we do here. Notice how these are shape layers. What I want to do to this, I'm not going to be able to do to a shape layer. So I need to make it not a shape layer, and I also need to get that layer style. And the way to do it, just create a new layer on top, and then select both those layers and just press Control E or Command D on the Mac. And then just do the same thing for each one. Create a new layer above, select the two, and merge them together.
This is such an easy tutorial.
Hey, they got it on video. They can watch it after. And merge them together. So now we've got all our layers. We're going to change the blend mode of each one of these layers to overlay. And there. And another. So now we're getting close. So we got all of our shapes. The one thing that Mac desktop has though is they don't all look quite as white and clear as they are. Some are lighter, some are darker. So we'll add a layer mask to each one of these. Just click, add a layer mask. And we're going to draw some gradients on these layer masks. So let's go ahead and grab our gradient tool, select that black and white gradient. I'm going to choose the radial one. Okay? And then what I do is I just show and hide the layer so I know which one I'm working on. And then I just click on the layer mask and drag. And you can see it starts to hide some of that layer. And I just find a shading that looks pretty good. So that looks good there. Go to the next one. It seems to be the shape down here. And what usually looks good is if I come in, make it a little more glowing on the outside. That's what I keep trying to work for. There we go.
Oh.
There we go. And if you really want to get crazy with it, change your blend mode from normal, go down to darken, and watch what happens to my layer mask over here. Each time I click and I drag, it's adding to that layer mask. It's not recreating the gradient all over, so then you can get some really splotchy effects here. And finally, the last thing is I was never able to quite get the color the same as that Mac desktop, so I create a hue saturation adjustment layer on top of it, and I change the hue to -10, saturation to -15, and lightness to 10. And that gives you as close to as the color of that desktop as I can. But the cooler part about this is, if I double click on that hue saturation, if you don't want the same color as that Mac desktop, just change your hue, and you can get a totally different color as well. So that is the Mac desktop.
Well done, Mr. Boskowski. Alrighty. Well, guys, I've got a tutorial coming up here in just a moment, but first we're going to have to take a short break to throw things over to our sponsor, so stick around. We'll be right back right here with more Adobe Photoshop TV live from Photoshop World. Stick around.
Use your artistic energy. Heighten your creative potential. The Art Institute Online offers career-oriented programs for imaginative people just like you. People determined to learn what it takes to begin a career in the creative arts. Have the freedom to decide when and where to attend class. Call now and start your future today.
We're back. Okay. Everybody at home, you should have been here. We don't have any seats for you, but it would have been fun anyway. Okay, hey, I have a tip prepared for you, but before I do, Mr. Cross has got a little quick mini tip here.
I have a mini tip because I was watching Matt do his tutorial, and it occurred to me this is an oft forgotten ability that Photoshop has, because poor Matt went through, just to show you, he clicked on a layer and said change this to overlay, and clicked on a layer, change to overlay.
I remember that.
Here's a little known fact of Photoshop. You've probably seen this command called copy layer style, right? When you have like drop shadows. It also works for blend mode, so check this out. You copy the layer style, you select all these other layers, and then control click and choose paste layer style, and they all change to overlay.
You get $10.
It also works for opacity. So even though it's called copy layer style, it's actually copy the status of your layer, opacity, blend modes, whatever it is. So
Dave Cross, hey, you know what though? Thank
I
you,
was
Dave. That's the cool thing about Photoshop. You know,
gonna say that.
That is the cool thing about Photoshop. The program has such depth from so many cool things that that was really cool. Thanks. That was one I didn't know. Clearly, you didn't know it.
Hey, I forgot something. Can I add on to mine?
Oh, sure.
I forgot a finishing touch. Switch back over.
All right, switch it back over.
I forgot. Oh, jeez. That's anything new. All right, so there's one little finishing touch. It looked kind of flat to me. We're going to create a new layer.
It's not steam, is it?
Yes! We're going to create a new layer. Take your radial gradient.
Yeah.
All right, and you want to do a white to black radial gradient. Now mine is black to white. I'll just press Control-I to invert and change the blend mode to overlay.
Oh!
There we have it.
Yeah. Very good. All right.
Glad you approved.
That's wonderful. Okay. All right. So here's my tip I brought. My tip is for photographers. And now, the first part of this you may have seen me do on an earlier version of Photoshop TV. So, first part of it is, if you've been watching a long time, you'll go, oh, I remember him doing that, but then I added a little thing at the end, which is what the tip is really about. We have an image here, and it's over there on the screen. We have an image, and the image is got a bad sky in it. It's just kind of a bland day. There's no clouds. There's nothing interesting going on, and worse yet, it's just kind of flat. So the first part of this trick is, had I been thinking and shooting this, with some thought about it, I would have used a neutral density gradient filter. And that basically is a filter that goes on the front of your camera and it darkens the sky. So the filter itself goes from dark to clear. All right, so it just darkens the sky up here. So you can fake that in Photoshop, but this isn't the trick. The trick's coming up. So let's start by doing that. Let's just go and choose, make sure your foreground color is set to black, and then I'm just gonna go choose gradient. And it pops up this little thing here. Now, I need the sky black, not the ground. So when this gradient fill dialog box comes up, you're going to click the reverse button. All right? And so now we have an actually black sky. So all you're going to do to make it dark blue is change the mode from normal to soft light. All right? And then you get, so here's a before and after. So for those of you seeing at home will see much better than our audience does here. But it goes from, see, it's like really light blue, now it gradiates down. And you can control how far it gradiates down by just double clicking right here and then click inside the gradient. And this little slider here determines how far it goes down. So I'll make it just go halfway down, like that. All right, so here's the before and after. So that fixed part of the sky, all right? And by the way, if you choose overlay, it gives you the same thing, but much darker. Okay, so here is it before and after. See how it just does it up there. All right, so that's the first part. We'll just merge those down. Now, here's the fun part. This is the tip, okay. How to add clouds. This is two different ways on how to add clouds. So I'm gonna open up first. Hi, Matt. All right, here are some clouds, all right. So I wanna add some clouds to another photo. I'm gonna give you two realistic ways to do this. Number one is we're just gonna add a new blank layer. Both documents have to be open and visible on screen at the same time. Then you're gonna grab the clone stamp tool. Now, I'm just gonna go over here into the clouds and basically click somewhere. I'm gonna option click on a Mac or alt click on a PC somewhere in the clouds. All right, then I move to the other document and start painting. And it brings in the clouds. Now, you can probably, well, no, it doesn't look good at this point. And that's because, of course, I have two completely different skies. One is purple against my kind of bluish sky, so it's not looking real good. Don't even let that bother you, because here's the deal. Your standards aren't very high, so you don't really care. No, I'm just kidding. All right, so, all right, now you're done with the other document, so you can close the other clouds. Here's what you're gonna do. You're going to switch to the move tool, that's step one. Step two, you're gonna hold the shift key, and then you're gonna press the plus sign on your keyboard. What that does is shift plus is the keyboard shortcut that cycles you through different blend modes. And so what you're gonna do is you're just gonna cycle through them until the purple sky goes away. So shift, plus, it ain't that one, plus, 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 plus. That's getting pretty close. All right, so that's light now, it's not bad. Plus, 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 plus. Oh, that's not, let's see what we got. Ooh, that one's pretty good right there. So all I would do now, that's pin light. Okay, for those of you watching at home, I'll zoom in. There it is. Pin light coming at you. 3D. Right, there it is. Woo. Okay. So what you might do to brighten it up a little bit is just go to levels. Press Command L on a Mac or Control L on a PC, and maybe just brighten up the clouds a little bit. And there you've got your clouds in your photograph. Now, that's one way to do it. So let's try another way. I'm going to open up a different photograph of clouds. I call it Clouds 2. Okay, so here it is. You'll start off with the exact same technique. You go to your original image, you add a new layer. Here, let's go to the layers palette, add a new layer. Then I'm going to grab the rubber stamp tool, come over here, and click on these clouds. So I'm going to go over here and start bringing in this, maybe just this one puffy little cloud here. Again, I know that the cloud colors don't match, but I'm not worried about it. And we're just going to kind of let it go. Something like that maybe. All right, so here's our puffy cloud. It's on its own layer. Now we can close the other document. The trick here is we're going to use the blend if sliders. And to get to those, all you do is go right down here to the layer styles. Looks like you're going to choose drop shadow, one of these. You're going to choose the very first one called blending options, which brings up what looks like the regular old layer styles dialog box. But if you look carefully right over here, and I have to zoom this for those of you watching it on an iPod, there it is. It actually is the blending options dialog and not one of the regular layer style dialogs. Now, you're going to go and grab this slider right here, and I'm going to zoom in again for people watching on iPods. All right, so there are sliders on the left and the right. You're going to grab the top left slider under the blend if area. So let's back off, and you're going to drag to the right. It's going to look really harsh, but watch, and eventually the background goes away, but it looks really harsh. That's the problem. So the background's gone away. We're the ugliest looking clouds you've ever seen. Here's the trick. You're going to hold the Option key on a Mac or the Alt key on a PC, and you're going to split this in half. You're actually going to split it. And now you can smooth it right out. You kind of find that sweet spot where, there we go, where the cloud kind of looks more realistic. And there you have another way to get clouds into your image. We got rid of the background. So there are my double cloud tutorial. You rock! 2 clouds and 1 tutorial. All right, guys, well now it's time for the very special Dave Cross trivia question. First we're going to see who won. First we're going to see who won last week's contest. All right, what was the question from last week?
Last week the question was, how do you get this dialog box? And you had to be very specific. You couldn't just say paste, because it already says that on the dialog box. And the answer was, when you paste from Illustrator, you get this dialog box. And from the million answers we received, this person right here won.
Appearing through the magic of post-production. We don't know who it is,
right now. Look, there it is.
We're so happy for you, nameless person. No. Okay, there they are. All right. So, Dave, what is this week's question?
Well, do we have prizes? Do we know what our prizes are?
We actually do have prizes. We have a copy of Matt's
and Dave's.
Matt and Dave's Illustrator CS2 Killer Tips book, which is available right over there in the bookstore or at fine bookstores across the country and the world.
You know what?
What else would they get?
What else do we have? We've got the Photoshop CS2 Speed Clinic written by Matt Kloskowski, and very, very cool book. We have my brand new book, which is actually out. They launched it here at Photoshop World. It's called The Digital Photography Book, and just came out today.
And Dave Cross's
Finishing Touches book.
Wow.
So it's like a book cornucopia of bookness. And of course, you'll also get a 1-year membership to the National Association of Photoshop Professionals with fine people. And the cool thing about it is, doesn't matter where you are in the world, we'll happy to send those to you. And Dave, how do they enter the contest?
I have no idea. No, actually I do. They go to PHOTOSHOPTV.com and look for something that says contest entry or something of that nature. And this week is pretty simple question. Name this dialog box. So that's it. We'll put this up on the screen for those people watching at home, and you have to name the exact name.
I'll give it a name. I think it should be Angela.
I think Fred is a good name too. So
there we go. All right, so that sadly brings to a close a live episode.
Sadly.
Are you distracted over there? Okay. All right, brings to a close another chapter in our live our live version. Thank you guys in our studio audience here for hanging out with us. And everybody watching at home, and thanks to our sponsors, and we'll catch you guys next time. Next week we'll be back in the studio right here on Adobe Photoshop TV.
Thanks for watching Adobe Photoshop TV. See you next week.